Hello and welcome to Turtle Tracks Podcast. This is your host, Brian VanHooker, and I'm here with Andrea Fernandez and Mark Anthony, both of whom worked on the Tales of the TMNT Nickelodeon series that aired just recently. Andrea was the art director on the show, and Mark Anthony was the color supervisor. Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. This
Thank
is
you.
awesome.
I watched the show recently and really loved it, so I was just excited to talk to the people involved. This is the kind of stuff I love, is getting into the details of like how certain specific details come together. So,
hmm
uh,
Yeah.
I guess to get started, I would love to hear prior to the show, like, what is your history with the Ninja Turtles? Andrea, let's start with you. Like, where did you first hear about them? Were you a fan as a kid? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge fan as a kid. Like, I try not to talk about it because it makes it like dates me on like how old I am. And when I got on the show, it was really funny because they're like, it's the 40th anniversary of the Ninja Turtles. I was like, I didn't need to hear that shit. Like, no, no, thank you. Like, that's just like making me feel super old. But no, I loved it as a kid. The movies I think were like a huge thing for me. Like
Hmm.
around that time, like when I was a kid, it was just like the biggest thing ever. And then I had a little brother who just had Ninja Turtles all over the house that I was constantly tripping over. And I feel like that was a really fun, I don't know, experience for me and my brother because it was just like the kind of show that we can enjoy together. It was like Ninja Turtles and Batman. And those are like the two shows that I felt like even though, it wasn't necessarily geared towards girls, it was still one of those shows that I felt like I could openly watch and we would have a lot of fun watching together. So yeah, growing up, I loved it. I loved it so much that I would emulate the turtles and ended up in the hospital. And I have a really big scar in the back of my head
Love
that's
this.
still there because I was like trying to be brave and slide down the slide while yelling cowabunga. So so yeah, now when like SMP has notes like, oh, kids aren't gonna imitate that. I'm like, I was one of those kids. I imitated everything that they did and landed myself in the hospital. So yeah, anyway, huge part of my childhood. Obviously loved it growing up. And then every time they've done like little like new iterations or have a movie, I've had very strong thoughts about it. But like yeah, I think like, it's something that just brings you back so easily and it's a connector for so many people. So when I got the opportunity to do it, I was like, well, I'm not gonna do Ninja Turtles. So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyways, quick. I tried to be quick. Sorry, Mark. You go ahead.
No, that's perfect.
No, it's actually kind of funny because I'm gonna have a very similar story.
Also
Same
with
thing.
head injuries?
Yeah, I actually have a. I'll get to it, but yeah. So basically, the same thing. Like I was a kid. The very first Ninja Turtles came out. And I actually wasn't allowed to watch it because my mom says, "Oh, there's too much fighting in it." My dad's like, "Oh, whatever, let him watch it." So I eventually watched it, and then same thing. Like I'm a huge fan. Like I love Ninja Turtles. It was basically my favorite movie. So as a boy, I would play with my friends. We'd fight, and we actually say so. This is probably the reason why my mom didn't want me to watch it, because we'd actually emulate fights and stuff together. And we were playing in my bedroom one time, and one of my friends like he threw me, and my head landed right on the corner of the bed, and I still have the scar on my head. And I was like, and basically my head hit the corner of the bed, and I had to get like 4 or 5 stitches. Um, and then my mom came running in. See, this is why I don't want you to watch Ninja Turtles. Blah blah blah. I don't want you to watch fighting. So she had her point, but like it didn't matter because I love Ninja Turtles. So then, fast forward to 2023. Andrea sent me a message and said, "Hey, do you want to work on Ninja Turtles?" So, I obviously same thing. I wouldn't say no because it's been my whole childhood, and I grew up with it, and to actually work on it now, it's like it's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's cool.
it's like kind of like a one in a lifetime experience because like who knows the way animation goes if there's gonna be more if not but at least at this point we got to work on Ninja Turtles, so it's probably like a highlight of my career for sure.
You both mentioned the movie. Is there a favorite one of the movies that you enjoy most?
I like Secret of the Ooze.
Really?
But let's secret of the use with matching scars. Yeah.
Also, Secret of the Use? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I like that one too, yeah.
That's
I
great.
kind of like the third one too. I know it's really bad, but like when they go to Japan, it's just like I'm sure it's all. I haven't seen it in a long time. That's the one, the third one, right? And I
Yeah.
I
think
love the third one. Like I'll admit, like I get really like I know that the animatronics are way worse. But I get like I don't know. I genuinely enjoy the third one. So
yeah, me too. It was just like one of those things. I'm like, I probably shouldn't watch that again and ruin it for myself.
it might be
In,
one of those.
in my head, it's still good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess one thing I'm curious about was when this show started, was the new movie out yet?
No,
Okay.
it was. I actually got on. It was a really interesting development how I got on the show, but I don't think I can share all of it, so I'm going to share the chill version. I got on the show a little bit later than I'm accustomed to getting on a show. But when I met with showrunner, the showrunners, they were both they had great personalities, and that's a huge marker for me to come onto a show. It's like, can I work with these two creators? Because that's kind of the most important thing. But I didn't see any of the movie. I had like maybe heard something was going on, but I didn't know anything about it. Then once I had the interview, they told me like, oh, Seth Rogen is behind this and this and that. And I was like, okay, I held like my expectations are like super low. I'm not because I feel like sometimes I don't know, like old, like they grab old franchises and
Oh yeah.
it it's just not exciting. If you're in animation, you're almost always cringing. Like it's just always like, oh no, they did that to my favorite thing. Shit. Um, but then like shortly after I signed on, I saw some of the artwork and I was like, you know what? Actually, this is looking awesome. I think I can turn this into something for us. And then I started seeing the animatics from the movie and I was just like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. Like as soon as I heard Jackie Chan, I was like, this is like everything I would want as a kid who watched like Ninja Turtles and Rumble in the Bronx all in one like 90s nostalgic movie. So I was so in after that point.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Now, like, did you have to like wait on like when did the show? Because the show obviously follows the movie in look, but it also has its own thing going on because of it. It has to. I guess
Mhm.
my question is, when did the show find its look and how it like and what the compromise was between the look of the movie and what was achievable on TV?
So I've been doing this is my third show. So I came in, I think the reason I came onto the project was because I understood very readily what needed to happen
Okay.
in order for us to get something on screen. So I went into it very kind of like in a way like production oriented, like what can I do in this amount of time with this amount of artists and like how can I get this on screen and not my biggest fear was like, I don't want to be the shitty version of the movie. So I think in order for us not to be that, it was very like, okay, we have to make it like have its own flair. Like
Sure.
I wanted it to take inspiration from the movie, but I also needed it to be its own thing. And one of the things that I did get to see was some early concept art of the movie. Like I didn't know what the final footage was looking like, but I'd seen like really early concept art of the movie. And I fell in love with the concept art. And I was like, well, here, on the movie, they're trying to make their CG look like concept art, right? Like that was the whole vibe of the movie, like very kind of like hand drawn elements and things that would make the CG stuff more lived in.
Hmm.
But on the 2D side, I was like, well, I don't have to chase that at all. I can just go all in on 2D. Like I can just go as hard as I want to on that concept art. So I really ended up taking more of the concept art than the finished look of the movie and translating that into something that we could actually produce on screen.
Oh, very cool. I'm curious, like, like whether, like, especially with the four turtles, like, I don't know, was there certain things that maybe like wouldn't be readily apparent to the viewer that were like difficult in getting this character from 3D to 2D?
Oh yeah, this like character design was the most challenging aspect of this project. Because the showrunners and Nickelodeon and everybody was so invested in this like sketchy look, that's actually something really hard for 2D to pull off because, it's like, probably over 100 animators and people touching these. And the more variety there is in the drawing, the harder it is to systemize.
Sure.
So It was a weird like balance of like, okay, how can we get this to look rough around the edges and cool, but still something that many people can draw, right? Because it takes so many people. And if you've seen some of the footage, like it is hand-drawn animation. It's beautifully done. And so we needed, to really streamline the design in order for many hands to be able to handle each one of these turtles. And they are very difficult to draw. It was very challenging.
Yeah, they're really not made for like, the whole point of, previous turtle cartoons that are at least 2D is that you have to have those repeatable like designs that a million people in Korea can draw with a handful of notes, right? So I mean like yeah, they're very kind of like uneven. The shells are gigantic, their bodies are very skinny. So I imagine this was much harder to get straight.
Yeah, I think a lot of that happened at the point that I came on and started working with Titmouse. That was something that was really difficult to rein in. I think Titmouse initially had, problems getting there, but then they kind of came out swinging. It was just amazing to see the work that was coming through because, like you said, like the look of this show is a little bit more subjective, right? So like you do have to have a little bit more of an artistic eye to go in there and animate an entire scene.
Very cool. Um, Mark, so you did color supervision on the show. I guess the question I have for you is like, is there anything, so when did you get involved? Was the movie out yet or anything like that? Or was it way before that as well?
So I'm not sure exactly, Andrea, when you started, but I probably started maybe 4 to 5 months after got everything going.
Uh, Man, I don't remember. I'm gonna say like 3 months after, but I tapped Mark. I like once I started setting the look for what the city and things like that would look like. I tapped Mark pretty quickly after that because I wanted him to, initially he was gonna be a painter on the show, but I always knew he might end up being a lead on the show because I always loved his work. So yeah, I grabbed him a few paint and then a few other painters, but Mark really helped set up a lot of the early color on the show.
Yeah, like I mainly did like I said with color supervision, there is the broad aspect with character color, but yeah, my main area was all background related work on the show.
I guess like similarly, was there a challenge of grabbing the color palette from the movie and bringing that down to 2D? That
A little bit, yeah. Like we grabbed inspiration where we could, because like yeah, at the time there was just like maybe one trailer for the film out at that time, so
sure.
that even that it was enough to inspire us for like saying like, hey, like here's some stuff we can bring into 2D into the show from the film. So we kind of did that, but then at the same time, like it is a 2D show, so like a big difference from our show from the movie is there's line work involved. So we have to make sure the line work blends with the background painting and it all works together. But then has that kind of like that rough edge that the film has. So it was I don't know. I don't know if it was, I would say, like a challenge, but like I would say, like like it's kind of like Andrea said, like you want it to look like the film, but not like a crappy version of the film, but then also have like its own flair. So, you know, that also goes to the amazing painters we had in the show, and then also Andrea's awesome art direction. So it was a full team effort to get that look. But I think once we got it, it was like just like Andrea said, like it was like she saw one painting and she's like, okay, that's the look that we want, and then everybody else rolled with it. And like I said, we had like such an amazing team that everybody just got on board, and it wasn't like, oh, this painter is painting different. Everybody kind of synced together, and it just, I don't know, I don't know. It's almost like it came together like
I know of all the shows
very
I've ever
organic.
done.
Like,
Yeah, very organic. Like actually,
yeah.
we did have a painter from the movie though help us out on a few episodes in the beginning. And he actually helped shape a lot of the color thinking too.
Mhm.
That was really cool being able to have one of the painters from the movie as well just help us out for a bit. But it's two very different disciplines, like TV and feature are two
Sure.
very different disciplines. So we had to really concentrate and go after like not just people who could paint like the movie painters, but who could do it on a TV timeline. And it's quite a challenge. It's very different. I think, I feel like for a visual development artists, you get weeks at a time to get out a piece sometimes. On a show like Ninja Turtles, like the one we're working on, the painters have about 3 to 4 paintings they have to do in a single week.
Mhm.
So it's quite a challenge.
Yeah, and sometimes with that too is like we have to pick our focus, which is obviously always the characters are the focus. So that kind of gives us a little breadth for the background to make sure that the background needs to support the character. So sometimes like yeah, like there may not be details in certain areas because we're focusing on painting wherever supports the character. So we kind of give and trade a little bit versus like yeah, like the feature has like that extra, like Andrea said, they have extra time. We don't. Um,
Yeah.
but but
I'm so
everybody,
jealous.
everybody, like I'm amazed. Like we don't have that extra time, but everybody's putting out these awesome paintings, and like and you see it in the show, it's like damn, you guys did that amount of work in this amount of time. It's like it blows my mind that these guys just,
Uh, I agree. This show was kind of weird too. Like the whole time, I was like, "There's no way this is gonna work out. This is gonna be the worst one I've done so far." Egg on my face, like terrible, terrible, terrible. And then like every step along the way, I was like, you know what, this isn't bad. Actually, this is looking pretty good. And like by the end, I think I'm really happy with how things landed. Like I was surprised. I was consistently surprised at how well everything was like gelling and working and how well everybody was moving towards this style. And it just Titmouse, all the artists we hired at Nickelodeon, like everyone just kind of like seemed to sync on this. And that was like a rarity. I don't think I've had that happen. This is the first project I've had that happen on where I was just kind of like, wow, this is it felt very serendipitous, the whole project coming together.
I know, Andrea, you spoke about this on your Instagram, and I would love to get both of your takes on it. Was designing New York in the show presented its own set of like unique challenges? I'd love to hear about how it came together.
Yeah, so I this is my first action show, and like one of the things as a art director that's always freaked me out about action is how quick the cuts are.
Okay.
Because every time you're seeing a cut, you're seeing a new background essentially most of the time. That
Mhm.
means like the amount of backgrounds that have to go into an action show are much higher than a show. For example, I worked on Cuphead, the count is a lot lower. And I can be more precious with those backgrounds. They can look more beautiful. With Ninja Turtles, it was really challenging because here are these like insanely big cityscapes. Like we're tackling something like New York City in every episode, and then new locations and labs and robots and mechs. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna tear up New York City. That's crazy. So as an art director, it honestly freaked me out because I was like, I don't know if I could get the quality I want for a location that is so consistently like requires that much labor because it requires a lot of labor and hours of painting and drawing. We had a fantastic artist by the name of Chris Uriotis who happened to have lived in New York, is like a multi-Emmy winning background artist who I thank every day said yes to me. And he really did a fantastic job at setting up a lot of New York alongside Joey McCormick, who was our environment lead as well. And yeah, I think, Joey had a really good vibe. I think Chris had this really like amazing um, ability to capture a city in
Mhm.
these like very vast, beautiful drawings. And I thought that was like the perfect mix. Like Joey made the best kind of like dirty, bodegas and like gritty alleyways, and the mix of that, like bringing that like I like to call it like pretty grit, like into each episode was super fun to see come together because I was like, I wanted it, I wanted it to feel kind of like a 90s cartoon, but modern and still appealing. And I wanted it to feel like Rumble in the Bronx. And I wanted it to feel like all these like things that I loved, watching growing up, but also bring in like the years of doing art direction on series like this to kind of a higher point, right? Like I did want it to look better than people expected it to look. So it was super challenging to get there. I think if we didn't have such amazing artists on the show, I don't know if we would have gotten there. And on top of that, such strong people at Titmouse to kind of follow the lead and make the entire show look amazing.
I'm curious, like in the show, so the sketchy quality obviously made it harder to make uniform, but is there also advantages to it? Like, can you be suggestive with a background at times as opposed to crazy detailed?
I don't know, Mark. Can
Yeah, yes, yes. Like Andrea said, like the so for paint, what we actually got inspired was these guys' layouts. Like Andrea said, there was amazing layout guys on the show, so they would give us, the background layout, and kind of a little bit of the job is done for us. So it's like, okay, you can kind of see the layout, and you go from there and you add your color. Those scratchy lines did very come in very handy because yeah, like you say, like sometimes we lay in color, we add some lighting, uh but at the end of the day it's like you can take a little bit of a scratchy line and add that on top, and then all of a sudden your painting looks like it's finished.
Hmm.
um
Yeah,
so
it's forgiving. It's a forgiving style.
yeah, yeah. So and then it changes from background to background. So it's not like it's like, okay, you can steal some scratchy lines from a layout before and then dump them on top. It's not. It was a lot more organic. So it's like, okay, like what's the focus of your characters? Get your lighting in to support the characters. And at the end, it's kind of like a little bit of a post thing. It's like we go in with the scratchy line and we're like, we'll use it to add highlights, to hide line work, to give it like a little bit more of a rough edge to the actual painting. So it did help us a lot, in order to make a background in a sense look more finished than it is. It's like a little bit of like a little trick, so to
Yeah.
say, a little bit of magic in a sense.
I know for the movie, like I read that the art of the movie book, and like it was interesting how like when they draw these tall buildings, like as the buildings would ascend beyond what was the core information that we needed, it would get like the colors would get more offset and the detail would decrease, and it was such an interesting way to kind of like I don't know, to show like I don't know the diminishing detail that's needed. Like I don't know, I always thought that was like such a cool. So much of the look of the movie is such a cool thing, and I'm curious. Like it's interesting to me how that gets translated to a very different medium. So,
I think that's what was in a way easy for me to translate into this series, that I think the movie, and hats off to the movie and hats off to like honestly the producing team, like I it's super hard to convince people to let you be artistic.
hmm.
And I think the movie team allowed those artists to be artistic. Like the way they approach the CG is the way you would approach a painting. They're really just letting detail fall away in atmosphere, much like you would handle any 2D painting. So because they were able to think like 2D artists on a 3D show, when I had to translate it to 2D, a lot of that stuff just came in very naturally, because the design thinking was already kind of going through that 3D movie.
Mark, do you have a favorite background or environment or something that you got to paint?
There's so many, but I would think my probably my favorite one, and it's hilarious because like it was like this huge citywide painting in episode 106, and it's where like the lights go off, like there's a big
That one's
explosion.
awesome. I love that one.
And the funny thing about it is like it's like a shot that's basically on screen for, I don't know what, less than 3 seconds. Um, but again, it was basically the layout artist who drew this super amazing layout, and it's like, okay, well, you gotta now follow up with the paint. So even though it's on screen for 3 seconds, it needs to look amazing. So I think that probably was my favorite painting because like it was like huge citywide shot, like it covered like across, like it goes across the river all the way into the distance. Um, but again, like I said, it was on screen for like 3 seconds. It was, when you saw it, it's like, oh, that's amazing. Like the big explosion happened, the lights went off. Um, but like it took a while to paint. And I'd say probably that one definitely was my favorite. But
This was
I,
like a really important point in the episode.
yeah, it, it, it
Sometimes
was
like
different.
you'll paint something and it's like, oh, what a beautiful painting, and then it's gone forever.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, those little shots though, they give the show scope, right? Like
Well,
that, like it feels like a city. Then it's not just a sewer and a bodega and this
yeah,
and that.
yeah. I
No.
mean,
Yeah.
even just to bump on that point, whereas like even if the shot, like all the artists on our show, like they care so much about the paint, they care so much about the design. Even if a shot was on screen for 1 minute, or sorry, 1 second, the artists are still putting their best effort into that painting because we want every shot to look amazing. Um, you don't always get that, but that's just a testament to our team, how dedicated and how amazing they are. There's like everything that they do, everything that I do, everything that Andrea does. We want it to always look amazing across the board.
And I think that's kind of what's nice about 2D too, when you like, and I think why people put, like, even if it is a 3 second shot, with like CG, you do the art and it takes so many layers of translation to get on screen, right? It has to go through like lighting, it has to go through modeling, it has to go through like a bunch of stuff in order to just through so many hands to then get to a final picture. With 2D, it's like the painting that Mark did that he's talking about, it's on screen.
Oh,
It's
sure.
so direct. And I think that's one of the funnest things about working in a 2D medium that your work is literally on screen. It's not translated by anyone. It is your painting on that screen that you're seeing. And I think a lot of the artists on the show really take pride in that and do some fantastic work.
Yeah, and it's almost like too the paintings themselves are in a sense almost like concepts because it's the style of the painting that we're doing. So it's like that environment technically could have been like an environment that like gets pushed into like CG film or something just because the style of the paint, the look of it, the 2D nature of it's almost like we want to make these awesome concepts, but they just so happen to be layout paintings for an actual production.
It was cool to see. Like, I interviewed a few people for the movie, like Woodrow White, for example, and like it was so cool to see like their original drawings, like the first concept
Yeah.
drawings of that. I mean, like yes, they had to be modeled and all these other things, but like the rock city he drew first is the rock city we saw on screen. Like that's super cool.
Right.
So
Yeah.
unusual.
That is really unusual. That's what I'm saying. Like, hats off to the movie team because I don't think I've ever seen that before. Like, it goes through so much watering down. And this was one of the few movies in CG that I felt like they saw like Woodrow's work, for example, and they're like, okay, we're keeping the spirit of that all the way through. Like, literally any other studio would have just ironed that out until it looked like Sonic with the teeth. Like,
Yes.
so it was really cool, I think, of them to do that and allow the movie to kind of be its own thing, be really it's really fantastic in that way.
Or even just like no, and I mean, Sonic with the Teeth is one thing, but it's also like there's just and I love plenty of things, but there's just such a sameness to so many of it, so much of it.
Because that's the set, I mean, not
Yeah.
to I mean, that's what the studios are there for, right? Like they're
Yeah.
kind of like they kind of want to turn your product into like the common denominator, right? Like and I think that maybe on the movie having a superstar producer like Seth Rogen allows them to have more of a say in what they want that final to look, right? Like Seth Rogen isn't necessarily going to go and make a movie for Disney because Disney has a very, unique way of making what they want in their process. Sometimes it yields amazing, unique things, but sometimes, more often than not at the studios, you're really forced to make a lot of concessions so that everybody in the room can feel comfortable about spending millions of dollars on this movie.
Andrea, do you have a favorite environment or anything like that that you guys got to bring to life?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. I really love 108. Like I feel like that's my favorite type of episode, which is sorry, I refer to them as like our production order,
That's
but
fun.
it's the one where like Mikey is meets Lee in the bodega.
Yes, that one's yes. I love that bodega. I was gonna say if I had to pick one, I think I'd pick the bodega.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love
definitely.
that
It's such a
location.
realized space.
I love the city shots in that one as well. You don't see them as much, but you get to see a lot of it. I think that one also has one of my favorite character designs, who's Angel from the Purple Dragons. And I think by that point in the series, you can really see like Titmouse really understanding what she's supposed to look like and move like. And I think some of the animation in that, same with Lee, is amazing. Like for me, it's less about the environments and like how an entire episode comes together is very exciting because I get to do, like I look at the models before they go into animation, the special poses that are going to support animation, the color of the characters, the environments, the color of the environments, like the set. So it's like for me, when I look at when I look at an episode like that one, it's like it hits on so many levels
Mm.
that it's a really exciting one. But there's a few in there. Like I was pleasantly surprised. Like the one with Bishop, the ending with Bishop and the Mechazoids is amazing. And Mark really took the lead on that. So I can't even take much credit for that other than making it something that we could actually produce on screen. But I love how that one turned out as well. So I would say there's about three or four that are like in that 12 episode batch that are super exciting from the point of view of like, wow, animation is singing, colors are great, backgrounds are amazing. And it's kind of hitting on all these levels that you're looking at in episode 4 in art direction.
So I mean, I'm assuming everybody who's listening to this watched the show already, but like it's in two very distinct story arcs or like was this originally 2 seasons or was it going to be meant to be broken? Because it's like two completely separate stories. Were they originally going to be separate seasons or anything like that? Or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, they were. And of course, like this is like I think this is the third time it's happened to me where it's like I get on something, they're like, yeah, we're gonna release it by this date. And I'm like, okay, we have time to make it. And then they're like, just kidding. We're gonna push all things up. Which makes you want to like jump out a window. But yeah, it was originally gonna be, yeah, I think split up into two parts. And then I think I don't know why, like I'm not the one who makes any of these decisions. Obviously, it's like the studio and what they need and want at the time. But they ended up just releasing it all together, which was I mean, I don't hate it. I think it's great. Everybody gets to see it, like but yeah, and I think, I wouldn't even get used to that. I think this particular show is so flexible and it may turn into other things in the future too.
sure. Speaking of the first batch, do we want to talk about Bishop a little bit? Like, I don't know, anything that inspired her, challenges with her, anything like that?
Um, I have to like there was this one comment on the internet that made me laugh so hard. Because initially when the show came out, everyone was like, "Hey, just so you know, turtle fans are like they're gonna like not like things, right? Like they have opinions." And I was like, "Okay." Like like
Yeah,
when I
there's
kind
a
of
lot
like
of
stay, yeah, I kind of stay away from the internet in general when it comes to like anything I'm working on because I'm like, no, I'll drive myself insane. Like I can't work like that. But I did like when the first thing dropped and everyone was being very, like cautious about whether they liked it or not. Somebody like wrote like nobody asked for Abuela Bishop, and I was like
I think I
dying
see.
laughing. Like I thought it was the best like salty comment I've ever read. I was
I love
like,
it.
oh my God, I love it. But she is kind of like an Abuela Bishop, and she's hilarious. Like, yeah, she, one of our artists who was on very, very early to figure out a lot of the look. His name was Rustam, and he did the original concept for Bishop. Chris, our writer and showrunner, is fantastic in terms of like allowing us to like decide what these characters are going to look like and casting them and like figuring it out from an artistic standpoint. So I think he was like also had an idea of who she was going to be. But I just loved the design. I was like, this is so again, I have like no allegiance to like original this, original that. For me, it was just like as long as the turtles look like turtles, the rest is game. Let's play, right?
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
but for me, when I saw it, I was like, this is awesome. She actually reminds me a lot of my mom. So for me, I was just like, yeah, I get who this lady is. So I was 100% down. And the actress that does her voice is so awesome, so fantastic. So I was just like, I loved her. The minute I saw the setup, I was like, yeah, why not? Let's go in this direction.
There's a lot of like people rebel very quickly to anything that gets changed in this. I feel like I agree with you. As long as the
Yeah,
four turtles are those like four basic personalities, I think we're good. I mean, I sort of make a policy of like not to hate on anything in the podcast or just in general, just to kind of like give it a
yeah,
chance. And like
100%.
I always think the ultimate example is like if you read the Mirage comic books and then you watch that 1987 cartoon. It was the worst translation of it ever, but that's the version everybody grew up on. So like,
Yeah, and that's what everyone loved. Like,
yeah,
it's like you never know what's gonna hit. So you just have to like make yeah, I think you have to go into it. Like for me, I went into it like knowing, okay, there's a fan base. Obviously, I loved this growing up. There's something I have to kind of adhere to here.
hmm,
But I also have to make things that I like because if I don't make things that I like, it's going to feel dishonest. It's going to feel like no one really cares about what this looks like. Like I'm just checking off boxes. Um, so yeah, I think like I mean, that's always been my North Star with this. I'm like, if I would have thought this was cool as a kid, great. And if me as an artist can look at it and be happy with it, like a professional artist be happy with it, I'm like, that's a plus, right? So like that's kind of how I approach the whole show and most of the design within the show. So when I get something, it's like if it's really exciting or I laugh, like sometimes I'm like Scumbug. I laugh at Scumbug every single
yeah,
time.
great, yeah.
Yeah, like there's just weird shit in there, and I'm like, but it's Ninja Turtles. That's what's so fun about it. Like, I'm not gonna iron it out. Like, I never wanted to iron out the weirdness or silliness of it, but I still want to make the show really appealing, really good looking, really high production value. So it's just like this weird, like, I don't know,
What's
like,
the point too in like continuously repeating what had been done? Like, then
yeah, then just
why
watch the.
continue the franchise? Frankly, like,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think you have to allow the people who are crazy enough to go into these things and make new ones, you know, the latitude to work on something cool and new and in their, in their eyes at least. Although you said you don't really like hate on anything that much. Like I really don't like the Michael Bay ones.
I the, I I have a hard time abstaining, particularly from those. I'll say this, I really like the second movie's take on Bebop and Rocksteady. Like, however much time they consume on screen, that 20 minutes of those two characters nailed it, really great.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I have a really hard time being neutral about those ones specifically.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
was
it's
funny
tough.
is like when I got on the show, it's like, okay, as long as I don't do that, like in the way that they look, I think I'll
Oh,
be
oh,
okay.
so
Because
bad.
for me, it's like no, 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 no. Like it's odd. Like when you grab a Ninja Turtle, like you know what you want that Ninja Turtle to look like. There's variations, but there's this like marker as to what they can look like. It's really funny. I have like a 1 year old, and I've never given him anything Ninja Turtles, but as soon as I gave him like his first little like because I got it from the toy makers gave us like a bunch of turtles, so I brought one home and I was like, oh, check this out, like not thinking about it, this kid's eyes lit up like ah.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, there's some magic, and I truly believe this from like a design standpoint. I'm like, there is some weird perfect combination of color, eyes, shape that makes these characters just kind of universal.
Just
So
completely
he,
agree.
he's
Yeah.
next on the list to get a battle scar from fighting.
Right.
I know. I'm like, I really try for him not to watch it, but it's funny. Sometimes I'll be checking footage and stuff like that. And he like catches it and he like runs over and gets like so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm dead meat if he ever sees this show.
Mark, do you have a favorite or anything you want to say about Bishop or those episodes or the Mechazoids for that matter? Because they looked awesome also.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually hype about Bishop like the towards the end of episode 5, leading into episode 6. Episode 6 is one of my favorites, so Bishop is in that one a lot. Um, I actually like I love the design. I love the character. Yeah, like I think episode 6 where like actually at the end of episode 5 when she went crazy, like I don't know if you've seen that one. Um,
Oh yeah, I've seen them.
we kind of had fun.
My daughter and I watched it like that day. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
we
all.
kind of had kind of fun like reviewing that actual frame, and as it was like when we first saw, it, I was like, "Whoa, this is going crazy!" And then everybody's like, "Yeah, let her go crazy." So like, I think that was super fun. And then when it led into episode 6, like I kind of felt bad when she was getting beat up in episode 6. I was like, okay, and
Yeah,
it
her
was
like
like,
redemption
I
story. We're
was
all,
like, I
oh
was
man,
like, oh no. But
pause.
then, but then the turtles went and helped out. So it was like, okay, yeah, oh here, yeah, and like now it's all coming together. So yeah, I actually did like that character a lot.
I love
So
that character. The
yeah,
Mechazoids are so fun. Like I actually, when I first saw the boards, I was like, no, 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 no. I'm like, what? Are you
yeah,
insane? I'm like, how the frick are we gonna do this? Like,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And that shot with the Mechazoid jumping out, like when they were all jumping out that window, like we have a super cool, huge poster at the studio that we like took a screen grab almost like it was like a style frame. So we printed that out. But like that's one of my favorite shots too, where they're jumping out the window. And
oh,
we
I
got
love that shot. Yeah,
that
that's
red lighting on the characters on
yeah.
the Mechazoids on the back. Like that was awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, the
Alan was
animation,
crazy on that one. Like he's like our other showrunner, and I was like, oh my God, how is this gonna happen? But we had a great partner again in like Titmouse, and we were able to figure it out and come up with like clever solutions. Like hats off to like Alan in that sense. Like he's a super awesome showrunner that allows us to like think and like figure it out and just come up with like, okay, he gives us like something crazy to execute, but then he gives us the latitude to figure out how to execute that and like make concessions where we need to so that we can have on a 2D show a screen like like a shot where we have a freaking 1,000 mechazoids getting blown up. Like that's actually really hard to do. Same with like the actually one of the coolest things in the show was the if you've seen like pencil tests of this is the way they did the mech that she's in when
Hmm.
she's like piloting it. That is actually all CG.
Oh,
And yeah, you don't know. Like because it's actually super difficult. It was super difficult to figure out. So that piece is all CG, but everything around it is animated in 2D. So we had a lot of ways to like cleverly hide that um in a way that most people wouldn't be able to catch. There's like only one frame where I'm like, you can see CG right there.
oh man,
Um
that's such like a. I mean, I'm not super versed in this, but like I've always been able to catch like when Bender's 3D on Futurama, right? Like I know there it's not supposed to move this way, and then I see it, I'm like, oh, that's a 3D image on a 2D thing. I did not see it. That's great.
Yeah, we were really specific on how to hide it when it did reveal itself. But I think for the most part, they did such a fantastic job that I don't think many audiences would catch that at all. So yeah, those are like, things that we had to like figure out and make concessions about and ultimately ended up looking awesome. Like there's shots where like I remember seeing the pencil test like when like Bishop like whips like Raph up against the wall in that lab and I was like, "Oh my God, this looks so good." Like I would get so excited because I was like it was the weight was there, it looked awesome and then I was like once the color comes in, it's going to look amazing. But yeah, seeing the pencil test for things like that was actually one of the most rewarding things for sure for my career. I was like, this is animation. I'm like, this is by choreography and it's 2D animation and it's freaking awesome and it's Ninja Turtles. I'm like, this is great.
And I think it was also made it cool is like like we went more we went with like a widescreen aspect, so it was like more cinematic in a sense too. So like the shots looks more cinematic. And like you said, like yeah, I don't think most people realize that that's a 3D character. I look at it and thought it was 2D too. Uh,
Yeah,
Is
I
there
mean,
a
I
like
knew, but like it's like yeah,
yeah,
it's like it looks
yes.
seamless. And yeah, like you said, that's actually a great compliment that you said you didn't even notice that.
no, I
That
didn't. Yeah.
yeah,
Is there like a different I don't know, like frame rate or something to the show? Because the way that it moves, it kind of and works perfectly for the kind of sketchiness to it. But is there something different going on there? Because I don't know how to see it,
Yeah,
but I know there's
it's
something.
not because the drawing, so this is like one of the concessions that we had to make for the animation to work, right? Because it's so hand drawn, right? Like you always it's one or the other. People either complain about the frame rate or it's like it's puppeted. It's like you can't have both. So because it's so drawn, it has less of a frame count in between
Right.
for the animation, right? So it's not as like the animation isn't on like traditional twos. It's hardly I don't think it's ever on ones unless it's like maybe an effect. So there's like a lot of drawings are held for maybe three frames versus two or four. We never really get to sixes. Like it's a really kind of like um yeah, there's less in betweens,
Interesting.
but the keys are better and the in-betweens are hand drawn in order for us to get to that look, right? Because without it, if it was fluid like like a harmony show traditionally is or a flash back in the day flash show would have been, that's where you get a lot of that like smooth movement.
Like two
And
smooth sometimes, right?
yeah, and so for us, it was like, you know what, I'm okay. I wanted to see, and so did Alan, and so did Chris. I'm okay sacrificing a little bit of that frame to get a better drawing. Like the drawing for me was super important. And I think, episode one, episode two, and some of episode three is like a little rough around the edges. And then at some point around like episode three and four and five, it just like boom, it goes. Like they totally get how to like animate at that level and understand the models and the drawings get really great and the movement just looks awesome. So yeah, sorry if I went on long about
No,
that.
no,
It's
no. That's like I'm so interested in that stuff, and like there's so much like precedent for that. I mean, Chuck Jones was is keeping the same frame of bugs for however many
yeah,
seconds on the screen because to make that work. Or I mean, Hanna-Barbera was probably too far in that direction because it was like they
right.
just did
That's like
whatever they could to make it as cheap as possible. But
right.
like, so I, like but I think the way it works is like okay, the frame rate's different, but it works with the kind of sketchiness and the kind of rough quality the show's bringing on. So it really works in your favor, I think. So
Right, exactly. And that we had seen like I think Alan brought some stuff up and so had I from like these like French animated shorts
right.
and obviously like because Alan came from Rise, he's more familiar with that like anime timing as well. So we were like, we can't ever get to like anime timing, but there is this like in between of like, okay, we don't have to be completely fluid and it doesn't have to be anime timing. Where's the soft spot? And I think a lot of the examples we kept landing on were these like French animated shorts and that did it really, really well. And we're like, okay, something kind of like that. So we were chasing that look that we'd seen on a very small scale produced in some projects, and we're like, okay, let's try to do something like this, but on a larger scale.
That's super interesting to me. I love that. I'd love to talk about the East River 3 before I let you guys go. Like
Okay.
design things for them, anything. Because I love that whole like I love when new mutants pop up. I love the old stuff being reimagined, but I loved like Mustang Sally, for example. I thought of all three were great, but that one in particular was like, damn, that's a cool design. And
Yeah, he was really cool, or
yeah,
they were really cool. I can't remember. But yeah, the East River 3, really interesting. Up until that point, Rusam, one of our designers, had done a lot of the show. Um, like the mutants, like translated a lot of that, but those three characters I found were a little harder to find. So I spent some time figuring out Goldfin with a character designer named Natalie O'Brien, and Lee as well, figuring her out with Natalie O'Brien because I found that she was bringing something a little different. So Sally was more of this like, you know, I felt like Sally's a little bit more traditional in terms of like
interesting.
the mutant you'd expect. You know, he's male, he's kind of like humanoid, and you know, he kind of like, I'm like, okay, I think somebody can kind of nail that. But Goldfin was tricky because I was like, Goldfin is badass, but kind of little and cute. Like, how do we
Definitely, yeah.
marry these two things together? And I thought Natalie had a really great take on that. And then Lee, I absolutely loved, and I ended up drawing her face like many times over actually because she was really hard to get. But then by the time we saw an animation and we really streamlined her design with like the animation team over there, like she ended up being awesome as well on screen. She moved so well by the end of it. I had the most anxiety about her because I was like, this is a hard character to move. She's like half dinosaur, half eel, like, and she just looks kind of crazy.
It's also huge compared to a
She's
turtle.
huge, yeah, and
Yeah.
she's her size makes her difficult to animate in that sense too and move well. And I had so much anxiety about her, but she ended up looking great. And then Goldfin, I always knew was going to move awesome because he's so little and he'll turn into a ball and just like, you know, like that kind of animation is easier in a way to get away with, like and
Right.
stylized. Um, and then Sally, I thought was harder to animate than I thought he would be. Like, um, I love the design. I love that he was pink. Like, I was so excited about that.
Yeah, the color of that character just does
Yeah.
it. Right.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and I was so excited when I don't know. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but cut it out if I say the wrong thing that's not out yet. But when I saw the toys, I was like,
The
"Oh
toys are
my
out.
God."
The toys
Okay,
are out, or at least are coming. And I was going
they've
to ask
been
you guys how that
announced.
feels.
They've been
There,
announced.
I know I haven't gotten any yet because I know I'm getting them for my kid. But I know Lee has been showing up, and the other two I know are
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
coming soon.
that's awesome.
So,
Yeah, so when I saw those like mutants, I was like, this is so exciting. Like to see this in toy form and like,
yeah.
you know, and I remember like going into the toy room, I'm like, Sally's the wrong color. He's got to be pink.
Was it they made it a different color first? Playmates did?
Yeah, it was like a weird like brown, but I get it because I don't know if they had originally the. I think that when you see a character design like that in black and white, you just assume it's going to be a very like
It's
I don't
it's
know,
maybe a
like
boy color, right?
it's
Like
the
yeah,
boy color. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
I was like,
sure.
no, 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 no. I was like, I want like I really wanted him to be pink. So like, they were great about that. Then dialing his like facial features in, and then getting like
Sure.
the right for the toys. So yeah, that's another insanely cool aspect of this. Like, I'm like, I can't believe I get to like make Ninja Turtle toys
Yeah, it's awesome.
and like decide like, yeah, no, that's gonna look like this. Like I, you know, um, But yeah, anywho, the East River 3, I love that arc. I think it's super fun. It's got some of my favorite episodes, and I'm a big fan of Lee personally.
Mark,
So,
anything to say about the colors in East Reaper 3 or anything that they're designing that anything?
well, I mean, I've seen Lee so many times. Actually, just like Andrea said, like I've watched 108. I don't know. I can't count now, but my daughter loves Lee so much. So like I have to watch 108 over and over and over. The bodega episode. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, I think like all three of the colors, they're nice because like they're all really different from each other, but then they all harmonize together. So, I think they're all working well. I think Lee is my favorite. Mustang Sally, I really like design because like for me that mouth design is like back in college I used to draw that mouth design all the time. I don't character design anymore, and I've never done character design in my career. Like I've done the background route, but in school, like I was more into drawing characters. So that mouth, when I saw the design, I'm like, oh, sick. It's like like kind of like something I like to draw over and over. So, um, I love the design actually of all three of them. I like the big fishy lips. You know, yeah. So I would say overall, Lee, I'll go Lee. Mustang Sally would be my second pick, but I think it's just that bias now. It's buried in my head that watching episode 108 over and over, that Lee has now become like a favorite character. So once that toy is out, I have to probably go buy it for my daughter too.
Oh, I know. I
I'm on the hunt
also
for
want to
it.
say that like Mark had a really big impact on the second half of this season.
Okay.
Because during and I hardly ever talk about this, but it is kind of an interesting thing on this show. In the middle of this show, I had a baby, so I had to leave for a few months, and then Mark had a really big impact on like, I would say like what, 7, 8, 9 before I came back.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so like the beginning of this first half of the second batch. And he did such a wonderful job. I remember being kind of like, oh no, what's like the second half gonna look like? It's all in the rain. Like I still want it to be. And I would have these thoughts meanwhile. I'm like super busy taking care of a newborn. And when I came back, I was like so excited. He'd done such an amazing job. Like
oh,
he
thanks.
really kind of picked up the baton and like made the second half of the season look awesome.
Oh, very
I
cool.
actually, to point that out too, actually a favorite moment too is the Goldfin Badfin part in the last episode. I think that actually is also one of my favorite parts. Was
Like on the Big Bernie, like
yeah, Bad Birdie
Bad
part
Bernie,
where
sorry, the
come
Bad
yeah
Bernie boat. Yeah.
yeah, Goldfin walks up to the dock, and it's just like that whole moment, and then they like he calls him Badfin. It's like I don't know, it's like a one of those little boy moment kind of things. It takes me back to like when my kid was like it's like this little villain that I liked is now turning even more evil kind of thing. I really enjoyed that as well.
There's a lot of
Um,
really funny stuff in the
yeah,
show. I
yeah,
remember
Chris,
when
man, like Chris is so funny.
that moment, like I literally had to pause it because we were laughing so hard, my daughter and I. And it was the part where um Metalhead dies, and Mikey's like, but we could just rebuild him anyway.
yeah,
It was like this huge emotional moment, completely
Yeah,
not. It was so funny. Holy
I
shit.
know. I'm like honestly, I'm such a fan of like the core team on this show. And obviously like Chris who writes so much of this stuff. Like so many of the episodes I'm like so invested, like, and they're so funny and they're so great to watch. Like it really is like a all-star cast. Like I I feel like I serendipitously landed in this position because I was actually supposed to go on and do another show,
Okay.
and that show got canceled last minute.
Oh no.
And that's how I ended up on Turtles. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna go do something else. And I'm so thankful every day that like that ended up happening because this is just such a fantastic team to work with.
Do we know if anything else is going to happen in this realm? I don't think anything's been confirmed or said anything yet.
Nothing has been confirmed, but if people keep watching on Paramount Plus, I'm sure there will be more. And
Cool.
it seems like people are liking it, so I think the studio is really excited about that. I'm optimistic that there's more to come.
Cool.
Uh, but I guess Mark and I can't confirm or deny anything.
but we can say please go watch the show, and more people please watch it. So.
I'll say it too. It's a lot of fun. It's really great. And like I think the way that they were sectioned out where like it was like, these nice 6 episode story arcs is kind of the same storytelling that a lot of fans want, which is in cartoons, which is like not purely episodic, but like having
Yeah,
these.
it amounts to something. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really they're really great. They're fun, and they feel like they capture the movie while still being its own thing. It's really great.
Yeah. I agree. I'm really, like I said, I'm really happy with a lot of what's happened on the show. I think because of the nature of what we do and because, artists are like this, I'm always looking for improvements. So it's like not 100%, but it's pretty dang close. I think everyone's done a fantastic job and it's a super fun watch.
Yeah.
Last
And then,
question. Oh, go ahead, please.
oh no, I was gonna say it's like one of those things too where it's like the marrying of like the artwork looks great, but then like sometimes there's a show and the artwork looks awesome, but then it's not as entertaining to watch. Where I think like Ninja Turtles is like this perfect blend of like the writing is great, it's fun to watch, and then the art and the animation is all amazing. So it's like this complete package almost. And like you say, like you found yourself laughing at moments. Like I'm an adult, like yeah, I'll watch cartoons. I don't necessarily laugh at stuff in cartoons anymore, but this one, like there's so much funny moments for adults. It's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's funny, it's entertaining. And then for me, it's like I know the characters are the star of the show, but I always like when I'm watching it, I always stare at the backgrounds and I'm like, oh,
Sure, yeah.
because that's normally where I'm working. But it's like I said, like at the end of the day, like the animation is on point, the characters are on point, the story's on point. So like it all came together, married up into this awesome show.
Or like Hun. Hun's hilarious in the show. I
Yeah,
love.
yeah. See, there's so
Han
many
is
fun
so
characters.
funny.
Yeah,
I know. I'm like, oh man, I love Han. Like, let's bring him back. Like, I
Yeah,
love. I
and
know.
and like Pigeon Pete, like the whole
I love Pigeon.
Pigeon
Bro.
Pete is
Like,
hilarious.
and
There's
it's
so
funny
many.
for everyone because I was like, I don't get Pigeon Pete, and then people
Yeah,
love Pigeon Pete. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
It's
There's so much
awkward. He's just awkward. That's what makes him funny. He just comes in these weird moments, and it's like this
yeah,
comic relief that's yeah.
I love Mikey so pridefully saying like I made him. Like it's just like
it's so
yeah.
funny. I love that too. I know.
Metalhead. I want to get the Metalhead toy. I still haven't found him. Like I've
I
been
found the metalhead toy.
pretty good.
I got one for my daughter, one for me. It was great.
Oh man.
That was really cool.
I,
Last thing I wanted to ask each of you was starting with Mark, who's your favorite turtle and why?
Uh, I'm gonna say Raphael. I always liked him. I, I would say basically I kind of gravitate to the weapons first, so I like his weapons. But I do like his attitude because like he's kind of like he doesn't give a shit in a sense. He kind of does what he wants on the side. But at the same time, like I also like Donatello. It's like there's all like little reasons why I like characters, but I would say Raphael probably, and maybe his color too. I think that like as he's red, so it's like a little bit more aggressive. So I kind of just gravitate to that style of character more.
Cool. Andrea, favorite turtle and why?
um, do you ever feel like your favorite turtle is the turtle you identify with?
I think so. Yeah, like I'm a Donnie
Right?
guy.
Like,
So
so
I'm not angry all the time, so just
I think for me, like I'm like, okay, especially in this series, I'm like, if I'm anyone, I'm definitely Leo. Like it's like, I'm the big sister. I am a little bit of a dork. Like I like this, like the way they treat Leo, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me and my family dynamic. But who I want to be is Raph.
Sure.
I'm like, and I think like I've always loved Raph growing up too. I'm like, I love that he would like just do what he wants to do and like just is a hothead, and I think that's really fun to watch. And it's kind of like, I don't know, wish fulfillment, like what you wish you could act like.
Yeah, sure. The aspirational part as opposed to like I'm just that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so it's a weird toss up. I'm like, oh, reluctantly, I think I'm a Leo, but I want to be a
but you get to be anybody you want because you're the art director on the show, so you can be
yeah.
anybody.
I
You,
guess I could be
you
anybody,
can.
but yeah, anyways, that's sorry, long-winded answer, but I
No, that's
guess
perfect.
What about you?
I'm a Donnie guy. Always have been. I think
Uh,
people who love Donnie are like so into Donnie. It's like really
yeah.
fun. I have like even my friend was just like she brought her son, he's 6, and she was like, oh, like Z Andrea makes the Ninja Turtle show, and he was like, I love Donnie. I was like, okay.
I think that I've always been like a nerd, so like that's just I've just gravitated to that one when I was a kid, and it's never changed. So
Yeah, no, I think I've met many people who are just like, I love Donnie.
yeah,
Like, okay, awesome. I love that. And everyone tells me now, no matter where I go, as soon as they find out I work on Ninja Turtles and they tell me who their favorite turtle is, even
sure,
without me asking, which I absolutely love. I'm like, this is amazing. Yes, of course I want to know who your favorite turtle is.
that's great. Well, I'm all set here. Thank you both. This is a joy, and I love the show. Everybody should check it out. How do we find you each on Instagram?
I'm under the handle Pepper Fernandez. So it's pretty easy to remember.
Cool.
But yeah, usually on there. Sometimes I go on Twitter, but not much these days.
No, why would you?
Yeah, mostly, and I post about turtles on Instagram.
Yeah, there's
Sometimes
lots of
thread.
cool stuff. Like that's how I found your like that's why I reached out to you too. Was like you guys started
Yeah,
posting this awesome stuff. So I'm so
yeah.
glad that this worked out. Mark,
And I
Instagram, how do
want
we
to
find
post more. It's just been like we're under the gun with like work stuff. So
you?
yeah, more to come in the coming months for sure. Because there's definitely more turtle stuff to put out there.
I love seeing the early artwork. Like that stuff. Like I remember I spoke to the guy who sequenced that No Diggity sequence from the movie.
Oh
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just want to talk about this for 30 minutes, like just this 3 minutes of film.
Oh, I know. I love that sequence. Yes, I
So
agree. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's there's so many great artists on there and like they all get to that's the other reason I think a lot of us pump stuff up on Instagram because it's like once, they see that you're posting stuff and they'll post their stuff and I'm always like encouraging people like I think like the animation director over at Titmus, I was like, post your stuff. And he was like, I don't know if I can yet. I'm like, just do it. People gotta see. Yeah, so I'm always like happy to repost and encourage people to post on Instagram because I feel like, so many people put so much time and love into this
yeah,
show. You gotta show it off. You
including
gotta
for
show
stuff that doesn't show up. Like somebody posted like a ton of the shredder designs for the movie, and I was
Mhm.
like, wow, should you be showing that? Like I was a little worried, but like,
Yeah, I am worried about that. Like,
yeah, like does that mean there'll be none of these? No, I don't know, but
yeah, yeah, no, I don't know. The studios have become more lax with what we post,
okay,
luckily,
that's
because
cool.
obviously it gets their franchises eyeballs. So like,
Mhm.
it's actually good for everyone. So yeah. Anyways, I'm at Pepper Fernandez on Instagram, and I will be posting about turtles as often as I can.
Cool, Mark.
Mine is it's OO Mark Anthony. So basically just put two O's in front of Mark Anthony and then you found me on Instagram. Which I actually have another post ready for some backgrounds that I painted, so I'll probably post that this week.
Awesome.
And
I'm looking forward to all of it. And again, thank you both for being here. This is great to talk
Thank
to you.
you.
Thank
Thanks for waiting on us.
you. Oh
thank
my gosh,
you.
my pleasure.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank
See you.